Los personajes más destacados de Internet y el mundo en Fan Internacional.
Muy buenas tardes, días, noches o momento en el que usted esté viendo esto, querida amiga, querido amigo de Fan del programa. Estamos una vez más para hablar con talentosos seres humanos que han hecho grandísima la historia de la cultura pop. Mi nombre es Cristian Baral, me presento. Hernán Paresi no está presente, pero ¿quién está presente con algo más que su candente voz? Es el señor Santiago Alonso.
Pero muchas gracias, Cristian querido. Yo tampoco soy Hernán Panesi, pero bueno, haremos lo posible por ponerle la mejor. Le mandamos un beso y un queso. Y aquí estamos, poco más que vestidos de gala en lo espiritual para nuestro invitado.
Por supuesto, porque hace nada, quedan apenas unas semanas para cumplirse los 40 años de una película que a nosotros nos dio un montón de ganas de tener bicis, a todos nosotros nos inspiró, en realidad nos inspiró y a nuestros padres les costó, a algunos, en otros casos, bueno, consiguieron ese rodado de alguna u otra forma, los que no pudieron, crecieron con ese anhelo de dar con una BMX, porque concretamente vamos a hablar de Los Bicivoladores, obviamente hablaremos mucho más de esta historia, pero también existirán otras tantas que tienen que ver con un solo hombre puntualmente o con un talentosísimo director internacional que tiene, por así decirlo, una cantidad de obras increíbles. Él ha tenido exitazos como Night of the Demons, la 2 puntualmente, aquella recordadísima peli de la década de los 90. Después otras gemas también por ahí dando vueltas. Aztec Rex, que es una maravilla absoluta del cine. Él se mata de risa porque seguramente vamos a hablar de ella y dirá, muchachos, yo tengo otras mejores, pero yo creo que él tiene tantísimo cine tan bueno al punto que hasta el mismísimo Quentin Tarantino lo ha elogiado. Santi.
Exactamente, es una alegría para nosotros presentarlo. Por supuesto que vamos a traducir esto que acaba de decir Christian. This director is talented. He had hits like Nights of the Demons and other gems. For us, it's a pleasure to talk with Brian Trenchard Smith, our guest today, with a lot to say about cinema and about our movie and his movie, BMX Bandits. So, no sé si le doy la bienvenida, si hago bien. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Claro que sí.
Hey, hola Argentina.
El detalle, Santi. Es que quiero un vino argentino. Contanos eso, mirá. Qué grande.
Yes, and very tasty it is too.
Está diciendo
anyway,
que es muy sabroso.
Your good health. A votre santé.
Salud. Brindamos con agüita por acá por una cuestión.
Salud.
Acá,
Yes.
acá
Cheers.
Salud.
Bottoms up.
Por supuesto. Qué lujo tener a Brian, por favor. Brian Trenchard Smith es un director increíble que puntualmente ha tenido una serie de gemas espectaculares. Ha hecho mucha televisión, también aquella vieja serie de Tarzán, que aquí la televisión abierta la solía pasar. Las aventuras de Flipper también. O sea, es un tipo con tantísima experiencia en el cine y la TV. Él hoy tiene un gatito precioso también, que tiene un bigotón ahí. El gato, The Cat, por supuesto. Santi, yo estoy muy contento con tenerlo a Brian aquí en el programa y me encantaría que ya empecemos a hablar de su historia y de lo referencial que es para tantos directores del mundo del cine. En general estamos hablando de alguien que ha tenido un cine exploitation con géneros multifacéticos por todas partes, sobre todo desde Australia hacia Hollywood, que ha sido algo así como su recorrido, pero puntualmente preguntale que, no sé si vos te acordás, Santi, es muy posible, mientras el gato es hermoso total y mira a cámara, hace unos años, ¿te acordás que se estrenó Turbo Kid, una peli que rompió con toda por la exploitation que era y su ambición mainstream, más allá de que tenía un espíritu de culto, y aquella peli tiene una escena con una bici espectacular, bueno, de hecho, la inicial al menos, su protagonista puntualmente tiene una bici y está más o menos inspirada en aquellas secuencias míticas de Los Bicivoladores. Contale si vio Turbo Kid y, primera pregunta, y segunda, si es consciente de la influencia de BMX Bandits en el cine.
Well, Brian, the BMX Bandits movie is a reference for many in cinema with multi-faced genres, especially from Australia to Hollywood. You know, a few years ago, Turbo Kid, a movie from 2015, was released where the protagonist uses a vehicle, a BMX as a tool. Did you see Turbo Kid? And if you saw it, do you think that without BMX Bandits, that movie didn't exist? Do you think that it was a reference if you saw that movie?
Yes, I think I saw it years ago, and certainly I think BMX Bandits was an inspiration for it. And there have been quite a number of great movies that have involved biking and bike stunting. And with BMX Bandits, I wanted to create what I would call a school holiday movie, where for Christmas release in Australia in 1983, we had to make it very cheaply, but we were still able to shoot it in scope in the big screen, and spend quite a few days shooting it. With a small unit. It's over 40 days we did it. And the idea was to give the kids a movie in which they could see themselves putting BMX bikes where BMX bikes were not meant to be, in shopping malls, football fields, wild in the streets, let's say. And you may note that there are no parents in BMX Bandits. You have a father figure in the police sergeant, but basically we created a world in which children run free, and we never hear about their parents. So I was lucky to find the young Nicole Kidman before anyone else did, and I knew pretty quickly in the shoot that she was going to be a star. She just had a natural charisma in front of the camera, and initially the producers didn't want me to cast her because she was taller than the two boys. I said, what does that matter? Just look at her. The camera loves her. The script had the girl written to tag along, and the boys were meant to be in the foreground. I changed that and put her in the foreground and them behind, because, well, the camera loved her. And go where the camera loves, I say. And I was lucky to have a subsequently, double Academy Award-winning cinematographer, John Seal, to shoot it. And I had given him his first director of photography job on my film Death Cheaters. And we worked together on Dangerous Summer, a bushfire film, and this was, I think, our best work together. After that, he was far too expensive. I couldn't afford him. He was Hollywood rates, but that's okay. But BMX Bandits was one of the most sort of glorious, fun experiences of my 42 film career, and I will always cherish it. And it was wonderful. It is wonderful. Whenever I occasionally have to present it to people, I presented it to movies in the park in the local town here after dark on a summer evening, and it was extremely well received. So about 100 people gathered on the grass in the park and watched it. So it pleased people in 1983 all over the world. It pleased people in the local park just a few weeks back. So it is a timeless film that appeals to the kid in all of us, who wants to sort of challenge gravity and the laws of physics on a BMX bike.
Bueno, Santi, lo recibiste de campeón ya mismo de la traducción.
Dice, en relación a Turbo Kid, dice, creo que la vi por Turbo Kid, y aclaro obviamente que BMX Bandits fue una inspiración. no solo de esas, sino de muchas películas que involucraron a su vez el mundo de las bicicletas. Aclara además Brian que con BMX Bandits quiso crear lo que él llama internamente una escuela de películas de fiestas, ¿no? Para Navidad en Australia, allá por 1983. Y él cuenta, lo hicimos con poca plata, pero pudimos filmarla en Scoop para la pantalla grande. Pasamos varios días filmándola con una pequeña unidad, en tan solo 40 días. Cuenta además que la idea era darle a los chicos una película en la cual pudiesen verse a sí mismos usando las bicis y que las bicis fueran algo que estuviera en lugares que no eran como destinados, ¿no? Que no eran su lugar de pronto natural, desde canchas de fútbol hasta shoppings y demás.
Totalmente. Te hago un parate ahí y contextualizo para aquellos quienes no conozcan Bicivoladores, recomendada pero absolutamente de corazón desde este programa, desde Juan el programa. Bueno, una historia de unos jovencitos que sencillamente gustan andar en bici, conocen una bellísima Nicole Kidman, por supuesto trabajando de otra cosa muy ajena a las andadas en bici, hasta que finalmente ella se suma a esa banda que empieza a frustrar los planes de justamente otra banda, pero de malhechores que habían dado un golpazo a un banco y que buscaban la misma lógica para unas cuestiones ahí económicas y por supuesto hacerse el dinero por el mal camino. Entre medio vemos una cantidad de niños al poder, que es algo de lo que cuenta recién Brian, quien está aquí con nosotros, y ahora sí, querido Santi, desarrolle lo siguiente.
Bueno, lo que contaba Brian es que esta singularidad, que es que no hay padres en esta película, sí hace referencia a una figura paterna en el personaje del sargento de policía, pero indica, básicamente creamos un mundo en el cual los chicos corren libres y no escuchamos nada sobre los padres. Entonces, cuenta como punto y aparte, y acá está la mención que estamos buscando también, tuve la suerte de hallar a una joven Nicole Kidman antes de que otros lo hicieran. Yo supe que iba a ser una estrella, y dice, una estrella natural, con carisma frente a la cámara, y también lo que relata es que los productores inicialmente no la querían castear, porque él contaba que era una película para chicos, y dijo, ¿qué importa? Y lo que hizo fue poner a Nicole Kidman adelante de los chicos atrás, porque él dice, la cámara la ama, y la idea es, según su filosofía, ir a donde la cámara ama al actor, ¿no? Aclara además, le he dado al director de fotografía su primer trabajo, y hemos trabajado en, por ejemplo, Dangerous Summer. Dice, creo que fue nuestro mejor trabajo juntos. Tras eso se hizo costoso y no pude pagarlo porque su tarifa pasó a los estándares de Hollywood y ya se hacía un poco costoso. BMX, afirma, fue de lo más glorioso y divertido en mi carrera de 42 películas. Siempre lo valoraré. Fue maravilloso. Cada vez que la presento a la gente en las proyecciones locales de mi pueblo, es algo muy bien recibido. Y él, por ejemplo, cuenta que hay jóvenes que se sientan en el césped a ver la proyección de esta película y que habla de, por ejemplo, 100 chicos reunidos en un parque que la ven, y que es algo que complacía a la gente allá por 1983 y que sigue pasando. De hecho, la última proyección fue hace apenas algunas semanas. Dice, es una película sin tiempo porque los chicos, el niño que tenemos adentro, la sigue amando.
Impresionante, clarísimo, y es una película que emociona un montón, no solo desde el hecho de también poner a los chicos al frente y al poder, sino también desde la comedia, desde los guiños permanentes también a la tecnología. La desesperación en principio nace por dos cuestiones: las bicis, que en algún punto es sinónimo de estatus para las infancias, y en segunda instancia la tecnología desde los walkie-talkies, que fueron o son artífices claves para esta película, algo con lo que muchos niños de los 70s, 80s y hasta 90s de ese día han soñado. De alguna forma también nos rememora a un tipo de cine, y hablamos de Australia, una escuela fantástica respecto al cine, y él mencionaba eso, ¿no? Que inauguró, dio pie a ese tipo de funciones cinematográficas ligadas, ¿no?, a la Navidad y a una fecha muy puntual en donde el cine de alguna forma presentaba su caballito de batalla en las salas. ¿Cómo era hacer cine en los 70 y en la década del 80 puntualmente en Australia? Una escuela, una usina fantástica a la hora de consumir cine.
Well, Brian, we want to know how it was like shooting a film between the 70s and the 80s. We assume that was a big experience.
Yes, it was. Australia was a developing market for film. Well, to put it in a nutshell, Australia had a self-sufficient film industry up until the end of World War II. It could make films and recover the cost of those films in Australia alone, and the receipts from the rest of the world were gravy. And after World War II, British and American interests bought controlling interest in the two major cinema circuits, and they restricted the best playing time of the year to their films, British films or American films. And they basically froze homegrown Australian films out of the prime playing times of the year, the school holidays, summer, etc. So it became difficult for Australian films to recover their costs in Australia, and the film industry basically died within a few years after World War II, and only foreign productions, bringing in foreign crew and cast, and picking up some locals, obviously. That was really the Australian films from 1950 to 1970. But then the Australian government got involved in developing an Australian film industry, and I just happened to be in Australia at the time, and just as like a lot of young people, wanting my chance at making a movie, and so I wrote a script called The Man from Hong Kong, and was able to get that financed as a co-production with Hong Kong, and that was my first big success, and I'm sure it played well in Argentina. It played all over the world, and that led to other films, which, along the way came BMX Bandits. It was possible to make The Man from Hong Kong for $550,000 back in 1974. As with every succeeding year, costs rose. I made BMX Bandits for $1.1 million in 1983, and that was quite an effort. And if you look at the film, it seems to have a big look, and yet we were able to achieve it with a relatively low cost, provided we could just keep shooting something every day. And we used, wherever possible, we set scenes against iconic backgrounds of harbour and beach and big vistas of the beauties of Sydney. In a way, BMX Bandits is kind of like a tourist commercial for Australia. And they played very well in England, where there are a lot of Australian connections in England. So I knew that it would have a lot of appeal all over the world, and it did particularly well in Japan. Anyway, that was costs. Obviously went up, and we had to keep adjusting to them. But there were some really exciting films made in Australia when there was state assistance in the development of films, and state contribution to the budgets. This meant that films that did not fit the Hollywood formula could get developed and funded and made, and then occasionally, or sometimes, American distributors said, "Whoa, that's really good, we'll have that," and they bought it. And sometimes they made their own version of it. But I'm lucky that I've made a few films in the 80s before my career moved to America. Some Australian films of which I'm very proud, and I would want to introduce Argentine audiences to those films. So in addition to The Man from Hong Kong, I recommend you look at my action comedy, Death Cheaters, which is available on Blu-ray from Umbrella Entertainment in Australia. And a film I made called Frog Dreaming. That's what it was called in Australia. It was called The Quest in America, and probably was called The Quest in Argentina. I don't know. You'll have to tell me. In some parts of the world, it was known as, in France, it was called Le Secret du Lac. And in England, it was called The Go Kids. And they tried to make it sort of looked like Goonies. But not that it really was Goonies, but they put a lot of Goonies into the artwork, as you can see from the British poster of the Go Kids or the video release. They never gave it a big screen release in the UK, which was very disappointing. And most parts of the world, including Argentina, it was never given a big screen release, and yet it is a handsome film on the big screen. So I urge you to, and the Argentinian distributor of The Quest, and if there isn't one, they should go contact Umbrella Entertainment in Australia, who will gladly license it to them. So that was, I think, an important kids film, just like BMX Bandits was an important kids film in its day. It is, Australia had a really great writer by the name of Everett de Roche. He wrote a lot of classics that you may have heard of, including Razorback and Russell Mulcahy's famous film. So this was written by Everett de Roche, and he wrote 7 or 8 films in Australia that were quite, were remarkable for their day. And I made trailers for them all, because in addition to, I had a parallel career when you had to be a Renaissance person in Australia in the 1970s and 80s. And so I had my own movie magazine, which I wrote 4 times a year, the quarterly 60-page glossy magazine. And there are pictures of it in my book, which you can illustrate what I'm saying. But so I did that from Christmas 72 to, I sold out my interest at the beginning of 78, and the magazine continued till the end of the century. And that I started it, and we printed 20,000 copies for the first issue, sold 16,000, printed 25 for the next issue, sold 22,000, and keep building from there. And so I had I was able to write what I basically do affectionate reviews of upcoming movies, and this would be sold in theaters and drive-ins. I would make trailers for other people's movies because I had that experience being a trailer maker in England on some Hammer horror films, and Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. That trailer on YouTube for that movie is my trailer. So I had these 2 sort of side gigs while I hustled to get money to make films, and luckily I was successful. So if you want to look at my best Australian films, The Man from Hong Kong, Death Cheaters, BMX Bandits, The Quest, Dead End Drive-In. Dead End Drive-In is something you should see. It's been, it has been, discovered. The French discovered things, and the French have recently discovered it and put out a good Blu-ray. And I did some commentary in French for them. So that's certainly one that's worth examining and talking about on a future occasion. And then finally, my final, Australian film that was actually thought of as an American film, because it was shot in the Philippines, edited in Australia. It was written by Australians, produced by Australians, but shot in the Philippines. And it was a Vietnam War film called The Siege of Firebase Gloria. And it is my homage to Zulu and a whole bunch of famous battle movies which tell the story of the battle. And it was important to me to tell the story from both sides. So while the emphasis was on the Americans in the middle of the Tet Offensive in 1968, and it's based upon a whole lot of anecdotes that a veteran jotted down and turned into a screenplay. That is, I think one of my, more important and significant films. If you on the subject of war. And veterans like it, feel it's truthful. But we wanted to show that wars are fought by brave people on both sides, and wars are started by politicians, but the men and women who have to fight them, should be recognized to be courageous regardless of which side they fight on. Anyway, that was my point of view, and I echoed it again in 1995 with another war movie, which is a World War II movie called Sahara, with Jim Belushi in the lead. It's a remake of a famous Humphrey Bogart 1943 movie called Sahara, not to be confused with a rather bad Sahara made by Cannon, and then a not particularly good version of Clive Cussler's book. Several Saharas, but mine is, if you want to see a classic World War II movie, then Sahara is certainly worth a visit. So that was the 70s and 80s in my experience, and I sort of concluded my days in Australia with 2 martial arts movies that had collapsed, and they fired the director on day 4, and they were to make these 2 films back to back, Day of the Panther, Strike of the Panther, and they're just coming out on Blu-ray now, and they will amuse you. Anyway, Day of the Panther, Strike of the Panther, they fired the director on day 4, got me to arrive on day 5, and I said, forget everything you shot, let's start again on day 6. And we rewrote the script, recast 8 parts, re-chose locations on a nightly basis, and shot for 40 days and made 2 movies. And Day of the Panther and Strike of the Panther are there, and they've just come out on Blu-ray, and they will make you laugh.
Brian, nos queda avisarle a Santi que nos dio una clase de cine espectacular. Lamentablemente nos quedan muy poquitos minutos. Por favor, necesito que nos introduzcas en lo que estaba hablando recién Brian Trenchard Smith, el director de Los Bicivoladores, a 40 años de su estreno. Y por último vamos a preguntarle por otro maestro del cine y explicarle que nos quedan los últimos 5 minutos y nos gustaría un concepto cerradito al respecto, y ya nos despedimos.
Well, Brian, this was a masterclass about movies. We only have 9 minutes left. We want to ask you about your experience with Quentin Tarantino.
Antes contanos qué decías, Santi, por favor.
Bueno, claramente, desde ya. Bueno, lo que estaba contando es que, muchísimo para contar. Él lo que relata es que Australia tiene un gran desarrollo de películas, tiene una industria que se autosustentaba, en especial tras el final de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Las empresas de Gran Bretaña y Australia fueron creando circuitos de cine, circuitos grandes, hacían sus propios largometrajes. Eso después fue en bajada, después fueron dejadas del mercado por, más que nada, decisión de los norteamericanos, con el objetivo de, hacer sus propias versiones de películas australianas. Mucha gente quería participar en el mundo del cine. Él escribió un guión de una película llamada El hombre de Hong Kong, la menciona muchas veces, y la cual fue su primer éxito. Dice, seguramente habrá llegado a la Argentina. Sí, película coproducida con Hong Kong. Después vino BMX Bandits. Relata que fue posible hacer esta película, la de Hong Kong, con $500,000 allá por 1974. Y dice, con cada año exitoso podíamos financiar películas y pude hacer BMX Bandits con $1.5 millones allá por 1983, lo cual fue, relata, un gran esfuerzo, porque parece haber una mirada sobre los costos bajos que nos permiten, filmar. Usamos todos los escenarios posibles en BMX Bandits, vistas de Sydney para embellecer, por lo que además puede funcionar como una película turística para quienes no conocen Australia, y que en Inglaterra tuvo puntos de conexión y que funcionó muy bien. Dijo, supe que iba a gustar en todo el mundo, y que gustó mucho en Japón. Eso será otro día, motivo de otra entrevista. Obviamente hubo que ir ajustando cosas. Cuenta que hubo muchas películas que fueron producidas en Australia, y tuvo, por supuesto, algunos hits. Por ejemplo, él hace referencia a una película llamada The Quest o Fraud Dreaming, que es una película que él cree que se estrenó acá, yo creo que sí, pero llegó a VHS, donde había una película, es una película que era muy cercana en el estilo a los Goonies, que es lo que le decían los yankees a la hora de compararla. Hubo muchas películas de él que no se estrenaron, sostiene. Dice, los insto a que busquen The Quest, y si no la hayan, busquen Umbrella Entertainment, que se editó además en Blu-ray. Dice que esa película fue importante para él. También hizo su propia revista, trailers para el Super Bowl. Él hizo una revista de cine de 70 páginas que editó entre el 72 hasta el siglo pasado, que la fue vendiendo como los fanzines. Y algo importante, que es que trabajó como trailer maker para películas del sello Hammer, y para Sergio Leone me pondría de pie, pero no puedo.
Impresionante.
Tenía muchos laburos y a la vez iba reuniendo plata para poder filmar, y bueno, nos insta que busquemos sus películas australianas. También filmó...
Quiero que nos diga una frase respecto a Quentin Tarantino, para aquellos quienes no saben. Tarantino lo mencionó en varias ocasiones a Brian como su máxima inspiración, como alguien que lo ha alentado de alguna forma a hacer cine. Y nos gustaría, para despedirnos y agradecerle mucho a Brian por el tiempazo que nos brindó aquí en Fan del Programa, que nos cuente en una frase qué piensa del cine y la obra de Quentin Tarantino.
Brian, we have a few minutes left, so we want, if you give us in one phrase, what do you think about the career of Quentin Tarantino?
Well, Quentin is a cinema genius. I'm a great admirer of his work. He has that ability to look at a particular genre of film and then turn it a little bit on its head and take it in a different direction and explore areas of moral conflict in a way that hasn't been done before. He was a filmmaker who dared to play with the timeline of a film, to rearrange the narrative, to cause the audience to have to think a bit more about, well, okay, what happened next? Oh, that happened. Oh, this 3 months ago. Okay. So there are all sorts of ways in which he, finds to intrigue your interest and to surprise you. I think, Inglourious Bastards is just an extraordinary, way of playing with all the cliches of World War II and coming up with something fresh. So to me, it was one of his most brilliant films. But each film he makes is different, and so I look forward to the next one. I believe it's called The Critic. And I hope it is not his last. He says he's only going to make 10 films. Whenever I see him, I keep trying to persuade him that he should keep on making them. I last saw him before Christmas when he came up here to Portland to do a book reading from his latest book about films, and we had some beer and burgers together, and whenever he comes to Portland, we catch up. Whenever I'm in LA and he's there, which is not very often actually, because he spends a lot of his time in Israel, then we catch up then. From time to time, you used to meet at Masters of Horror dinners because I used to attend those. Anyway, he is a genius and also a generous person. He came up the hard way. He had to really beat on doors to get people to read his stuff and to understand his scripts, and eventually somebody was smart enough to look at his script for True Romance and say, gee, this is fucking brilliant, and he sold it for $50,000, so which meant a lot to him at that stage of his career.
It is. And, Brian, we want to thank you. We have no time left. We want to thank you for this wonderful, wonderful interview.
Oh, I can do better. Yes.
It was wonderful. Yeah. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and it's such an honor for our show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
For me too.
That's all, folks.